Mega Man X4 is often said to be one of the best Mega Man X games, and a standout game in general. However, even after doing no damage runs as both X and Zero, I find myself disappointed with the game, and I'd like to explain why. Magma Dragoon stage is a good example. What's the point of almost any section in this stage? Most of them involve meteors, so for example, this one doesn't allow you to just hold right, you'll crash into them. But what's the correct solution? You slightly slow down and move on anyway. There's nothing you really learn because the meteors are never used again, except for the diagonal ones later in the stage that behave completely differently. And the meteors themselves always behave the same. The entire stage is going to go the exact same way regardless of how you play, and it doesn't do anything to stand out from the rest as there isn't anything interesting enough about the meteor sections. While the enemies themselves are mostly used in the exact same ways as in other stages. Baton bones and other smaller ones are placed in certain sections, gigadets are placed one after another, and so on. There is a bouncing spiky at the start that presents a possible interesting idea of dealing with enemies on a downhill slope, which makes it harder to hit, but the idea is banded afterwards. The stage is then capped off by the diagonal meteor section, where the meteors are seemingly random in where they appear and can screw you over as they spawn before you can even see them on screen sometimes. And that's it. The stage is already over. Another example is Slash Beast stage. The first half is very basic and is mostly just the same few chunks repeated with a ton of basic enemies spammed all over. However, the second half has right armor enemies that dash at you, which are very difficult to dodge due to how aggressive they are, but the rest of the section is outright easier than the first half. What's the reasoning behind any of this exactly? I don't even dislike the second half. It's fun dealing with the right armor enemies despite how comically fast they are, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the stage. Along with that, enemies often respawn the moment their spawn point is even slightly off screen. This game has a lot of waiting time. Some of it, such as loading screens, are understandable, even if it's weird that almost every stage is split into two. But the long stage-specific animations, section transitions, and intro animations are just annoying. And even mid-bosses tend to waste your time more than anything with long invincibility periods and staying out of the player's reach. X-Force controls are also a bit off. I prefer the PlayStation controls to the Super Nintendo ones for many reasons, but X-Force feel unrefined compared to the next two entries. Dashing has an odd delay to it, and along with this, you can't do a crouch dash to accelerate to max speed like you can in X6, as there's no crouching in the first place, making it unsatisfying to chain dashes on the ground in X4. Zero's techniques often use the special weapon button, which I find a bit cumbersome, and the techniques themselves feel clunky due to the rather long animations. I particularly dislike the dashing slash one, as it can get in the way of executing the electro, and Zero in general deals low amounts of damage, which makes him feel oddly slow against bosses. X's charging animation makes their charge shot feel slower than usual. On top of having a similar delay to the dash, the later games might be less flashy with it, but the different animation and allowing the player to charge faster to different ways really make it feel better. And that's something X4 entirely lacks. There's no auto charge or rapid fire in the settings, nor quick charge. There's no parts at all in fact. In general, the game doesn't have anything beyond the main stages and the two characters you can play as. There is no reason to visit one stage before another aside from getting a weapon. There aren't any interesting alternate paths, no need to think much about how you play at all. Hell, even the diagonal meteor section I mentioned in Dragoon stage before is nowhere near as punishing if you just play it the way the game wants you to and use the right armor to cruise right through it. This game is just not interesting to replay. And I don't think it's because of the low difficulty. It's definitely harder than X3 from my experience, but rather that it just doesn't do anything. Beyond the occasional gimmicks, the stages usually blend together in enemy placement and layout, and the game encourages you to just approach them the same way each time. So why bother? The weapons in X4 show that, well, enemies are often immune to them or don't receive that much damage, so to use them properly, you will need to memorize what to use against each enemy and what weapons to get. But why should you do that when the main Buster and Saber are often the best choices, as almost no enemy is immune to them and they deal high damage consistently, with the Buster in particular allowing you to stay away and move around freely without any long animations during an attack. And the final stages are... I don't even know what to say here. Spaceport is an incredibly short horizontal stage, with the game's most generic and easy to destroy enemies all over, ending with a vertical area where you can't see much, and a fight that's incredibly easy for a fortress boss. And final weapon is barely even a stage, as it's just 3 short linear and uninteresting enemy sections, and some mediocre bosses in between. Aren't fortress stages supposed to be exciting? A test of player skills? People make fun of X5's fortress stages relying heavily on old concepts, but each one of them was a fun challenge in their own right, and developed on those concepts in interesting ways. Pegasus' stage in X5 is similar to Spaceport early on, but the more interesting object placement with the X4 enemies instead often being used in rapid succession to slow you down or distract you, being combined with a bomb gimmick that requires you to quickly get to the bombs and destroy them, makes it far more interesting. I think X4 is just unambitious and almost boring, even if I don't outright dislike it. That said, I highly encourage you to express your own opinions in the comments, and in addition to this, I'd also like to recommend watching Spinball Productions' Why Mega Man X4 is Amazing, and Loot's Mega Man X4 Owns videos. As well, I don't really agree with them. I think their points are really interesting in their own right. Have fun!